LeaderCast.
This week on the Deep Leadership Podcast.
And like most humans, I don't love having those conversations. My first instinct is not like, hey, let's talk about hard things. Let's sit down and really hash everything out. I mean, I know how important it is. I want to do that. But oftentimes my instincts, like a lot of people's, are let's avoid it, or let's gloss over it, or let's just move on and keep it, keep things positive and happy. But again, great teams talk to each other, not about each other.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. The purpose of this show is to build a world with better bosses, and we do that by learning from the greatest minds in leadership today. Whether you're new to leadership or a seasoned pro, you'll get practical insights to help you lead with confidence. Now, let me ask you a question. What do professional sports teams and high-performing business teams have in common? Well, more than you think. In today's episode, I'm joined by Mike Robbins, former professional baseball player, best-selling author, and an expert in emotional intelligence and team culture. We explore what great teams do differently, how to build psychological safety, and why tough, honest conversations are the key to stronger leadership. Most leaders fail at building trust in their teams. Now, if you want to avoid this trap and build a high-performing team, you don't want to miss this important episode. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mike Robbins. Mike is the author of 5 books, including Bring Your Whole Self to Work and We're All in This Together. He's a former pro baseball player whose playing career ended due to an injury. He is now a well-known motivational keynote speaker and expert in emotional intelligence. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn more from his expertise. So, Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it is an honor to meet you and have you on the show, and I'm excited to talk to you. But get us started. I introduced you. You were a former pro baseball player. Now you're an author and speaker. That seems like a shift. Can you tell us a little bit about how you shifted from sports to now into the leadership and motivational speaking circuit?
Yeah, well, I'm starting year 25 of speaking and coaching and writing, so it's been a while. But yeah, my early life was focused on baseball. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area where I still live. And I actually got drafted out of high school by the Yankees. I didn't end up signing a contract with the Yankees at that time because I got an opportunity to play baseball in college down at Stanford, about an hour from where I grew up in Oakland, California, and ended up getting drafted out of Stanford by the Kansas City Royals. And I did sign a pro contract at that point. You know, the way it works in pro baseball here in North America, you get drafted by a major league team, you have to go into the minor leagues. So I go into the minor leagues trying to work my way up to get to the big leagues. Unfortunately for me, I went out to pitch one night in my 3rd season still in the minors, and I threw one pitch. I tore ligaments in my elbow, and that was pretty much it. I mean, I didn't know my career was over when I got hurt, but I knew the season was over, and I ended up having 3 surgeries over the next 2 years, tried to come back, wasn't able to make it back, and, was devastated, as you can imagine, because that had been the focus of my life for I started when I was 7 and got hurt at 23 and finally retired at 25. But when I got my first job, John, I moved back home. It's the late 90s. Internet boom, .com boom time was happening here in the San Francisco, Silicon Valley area. I get a job working for a tech company in sales, and I noticed there was a couple of similarities from sports. It was very different. But one of the similarities that I had been fascinated by as an athlete is it wasn't always the best players or the most talented players that made the best team. Like you needed some talent, but you also needed some of what we called chemistry. No one could quite define what the heck that was, but you knew when you had it and you knew when you didn't have it. I erroneously thought this was a sports thing. That very first job, I realized, oh, that's not a sports thing. That's a human thing. My manager was just calling it culture. And I was like, it's the same thing. It's all that intangible stuff that has us trust each other and work well together and bring out the best in each other or not. And I worked for a few tech companies over the next few years and just became more and more fascinated. And so 24, almost 25 years ago, I decided I wanted to study this more and learn more about it. And so that's what had me start down the path of learning about, teamwork and leadership more specifically. And I started coaching, and eventually I started speaking. And then my first book came out in 2007. So that's kind of what got me on the journey. And, life has evolved. I've learned a lot over the last 24, 25 years, but a lot of those things I learned when I was quite young playing baseball are still relevant today.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, your story is a lot like a lot of stories of people that I got into the leadership field. They sort of, you know, they didn't get there by design, right? They didn't start off, like when you're a kid growing up. I want to study leadership, but they sort of evolved. Interesting. Your background in sports. You started seeing, observing things in the business world that were similar to what you saw in sports. I came from a military background. I started seeing similarities to things in the military.
Right.
So it's almost a similar parallel path that I sort of ended up, working in the leadership space as well. But it was because of I kept seeing similarities, and people are people. I love that the fact that you mentioned that it's like these are human things. People sometimes say to me, "Well, the military is so much different." I'm like, "No, these are people. Yeah, these are people."
Yeah.
And so I think same thing with a sports team.
Yeah, well, and I haven't spent time in the military myself, so I don't know what that's like. Although I have worked with quite a few, folks from the military and groups in the military over the years doing my work. And what it seems to me, look, I mean, I think the stakes are a lot higher in the military. In often case, it's life and death. The mission is so significant, much more significant, and than winning a game or winning a championship in sports. But I do think what I've noticed some similarities between the military and sports, but it also relates back to business is, coming together as a team, understanding the importance of leadership and some of those things. I think there's something baked into the military as well as in sports. You realize if we don't do this, it's not going to go well, right? And I think in business, over the last few decades, I think people have become more clear about it, but the mission in business often isn't as clear. In the military, the stakes are really high and the mission is often very clear. In sports, there's a cycle to it, right? There's a season, there's a preseason, early season, mid-season, late season, postseason, playoffs, championship, and then it's over, and it kind of then goes in that cycle so you can really focus on it. In business, yeah, there's quarters and there's deliverables and but it kind of just keeps going, and then we reorg and we change, and then a new boss comes in, or there's new this, or business is up or business is down. It kind of, there's a lot of change and disruption in business, especially these days, but it doesn't have that same level of focus or mission sort of baked into it, I think, that the military and sports do. But I often say to people, I mean, the thing about sports that's hard is like there's only one winner at the end of a sports season. Everybody else loses. In business, like you can be the industry leader or number one, but a lot of businesses can succeed all at the same time. It's not kind of a zero-sum thing.
You mentioned something that sort of struck a nerve with me, in that one of the big differences I saw when I came into the business world was the mission wasn't always clear.
Yeah.
And I think like with sports, what the mission is like. Well, okay, we're going to win a championship this year or whatever.
Right.
And we had, we go do our thing and then get everybody home safely, right? And so, but it was very clear. Everybody knew the mission. And what I found in my early days in the corporate world was like I didn't know what the mission was. Like, I would hear one day we got to reduce scrap. We got to, we got to eliminate overtime. We got to reduce our costs. We got to be more customer focused. I'm like, I don't know what the mission is. I'm not really clear, and I think that was frustrating to me. And so one of the things I like to talk about with leaders is like, be very clear as to what the mission is so that people know what the mission is, because don't just assume they can read our minds as leaders, right?
Totally. One of the distinctions that I like to talk about in my work is the difference between our job and our role, our role being sort of what we do functionally. And my belief in all my research and study of high-performing teams is that everyone on a high-performing team knows they have the same job, and that's to help the team win. However, the question that I often get when people follow up on that is, well, what does winning mean? Right? Again, in sports, it's super clear. In sales, it's often clear. When I talk to salespeople or sales leaders, I say, look, I know sales can be really stressful. You can't hide from your results. The good news is, though, you have a very clear target. either individually or collectively, here's the quota, here's the goal, here's the number we're trying to produce. And you're either going to make it or not. You're either going to exceed it or fall short of it. And yeah, it's humbling and frustrating when you don't hit or exceed that number, but it's very clear. But again, if you work in operations or you work in HR or you work in finance or legal or a whole bunch of, even in engineering and product, it's some like the goals aren't as clear. I mean, yeah, maybe we're trying to get this product shipped by a certain time or meet this deadline. You know, you work in event planning and we have a big event, but a lot of times, not only is the mission not clear, it's like even the deliverables and the metrics aren't super clear depending on the role you're in or the function that you're in. And so that can be tricky. And that's why really good leaders, to your point, have to be really clear on what's the mission, what are we trying to accomplish, put some context and parameter around it so that everybody on the team is clear, oh, this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is what winning looks like, because it's not always just baked into the work.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think the best leaders are very clear on the goal and also what each person has to do with respect to their particular role in helping to achieve the goal, right? And I like what you say. You said there's a difference between a role and a job, right? You said what everybody's job is to help the team win, right?
Yeah.
And your role might be all our roles might be different,
right,
in accomplishing that job, right?
Exactly. And again, you know, look, there's some roles that are sexier than others. There's some roles that get more attention than others. There's some roles where there's both more pressure, but then more reward when it goes well. Again, thinking about sales, it's like ton of pressure, can't hide from the result. When it does go well, you often get a lot of recognition, you know. And I say to people all the time, like, if you're not making the product or selling the product in any business, big or small, you know, you're on the L side of the P&L, meaning you are an expense. So that doesn't mean you're less of a person or that your role is less important. But in terms of, if again, in a technology company, it's the engineers and the product folks. In a clothing company, it's the designers of the clothing. On a pro sports team, it's the athletes that are, you know, it's the Steph Currys and the Patrick Mahomeses of the world that like they're getting paid a lot of money because they have to go make it happen. In any business. You know, again, if you're making what it is or you're selling what it is, you are invaluable to the organization. If you're in a support function of any kind, again, it can still be incredibly important. Again, that finance people and operations people and, you know, folks in human resources and all the different functions within an organization to make it run at times are as important, if not more important, than the people making it or selling it. But sometimes understanding the context in which you work is really important. And then back to what you were saying, if the mission is clear, then everybody knows everything we're doing is leading us in the direction to help us win or achieve the, you know, the larger mission or vision we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. No, that makes so much sense. Now, I've written a book called All in the Same Boat, and you've written a book called We're All in This Together. The titles are very similar.
Yes.
Tell the audience a little bit about the core themes and pillars in your book.
Yeah, so I wrote We're All in This Together a few years ago, and what the impetus for me was just, you know, spending the last 20 plus years working with high-performing teams in different environments and different contexts. There seemed like there was this theme that would emerge with teams that really sort of figured it out. And again, back to what you and I've been talking about in terms of mission, it's like putting what we're doing collectively above what everyone's doing individually. And the notion of like us versus them or me versus you, again, I'm a human being and we live in an individualistic society, but like I often, when I'm working with a team and there's conflict going on, it's like, who's the them? Like I'm trying to like really, I don't mean to be, you know, naive, but like who's the them? Aren't we all in this thing together? And yeah, that doesn't mean we're all going to be best friends and get along all the time. And sometimes we're going to have some conflict and some challenge, but like figuring out how we get everybody sort of moving in the same direction, or to your metaphor, you know, get in the same boat together so that we go to accomplish whatever it is we're trying to accomplish. So in the book, the 4 pillars I talk about, the first one is about creating psychological safety, which is really group trust, right? The second thing is about focusing on inclusion and belonging, making sure that we're including people. But ultimately, you know, you look at Maslow's hierarchy, like belonging is a fundamental human need that everybody has.
Yes.
The third pillar is about embracing what I call sweaty palm conversations, those ones that we don't want to have, the feedback and the conflict and the uncomfortable stuff. And, you know, I often say great teams talk to each other, not about each other. And then the fourth pillar is about caring about people and challenging people at the same time. Like so much of my research, John, has shown me that those are the two drivers of performance. A healthy high level of expectation, so we challenge each other to be our best, and a high level of caring and nurturing, so we really care about one another as human beings, irrespective of performance, irrespective of even personality. But we know that sense of like, oh, I'm in a group of people who actually care about me, not just what I can produce or how I perform.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Cadre of Men. Leadership is a people business, and for men, real growth happens alongside those who challenge and inspire you. Cadre of Men is your force multiplier, helping you achieve more strength, deeper connections, and a stronger sense of purpose. I'm proud to call myself a member of this dynamic group. Cadre of Men is built for men who refuse to settle. With dedicated forums covering fitness, fatherhood, business, and more, we provide the tools and camaraderie to help you thrive. Our weekly Zoom calls dive into tough, real-world topics, often featuring expert guest speakers who will push you to sharpen your skills and mindset. Monthly meetups include intense hikes and hands-on building sessions where you forge bonds through shared challenges. From fitness and finance challenges to mastering public speaking, Cadre of Men delivers actionable curriculum in leadership, business, and personal growth. If you're ready to step up, push past your comfort zone, and lead by example, Cadre of Men is for you. Inside the Cadre, we grow together, lead together, and rise together. Visit cadreofmen.com to learn more and take the first step toward becoming your best self. This episode is brought to you by Pharaoh Skincare. I would have never imagined I'd be talking about skincare, but this stuff is truly amazing. Pharaoh is revolutionizing skincare by replacing harmful chemicals with natural ingredients sourced from regenerative farms. Now, weightlifting is tough on the hands, and Pharaoh's Epic Dermis is the best product I've ever used to get my callous hands back to normal and stay in the game. Now I use it every day. Pharaoh also works to reduce fine lines, wrinkles, and improve overall skin health. As Pharaoh CEO Charles Mayfield likes to say, a little Pharaoh goes a long way. Deep Leadership Podcast listeners can save 15% off all of their products by using the code DEEP at checkout. So check them out at pharaoh.life. That's FARROW.life. This episode is brought to you by the Salty Sailor Coffee Company, the official coffee of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Salty Sailor is a veteran-owned coffee brand on a mission to deliver premium, fresh roasted coffee while making a positive impact in the world. Their motto is drink coffee and do good, which reflects their commitment to making amazing coffee and actively supporting the military community. 10% of every order goes to the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, an organization dedicated to helping sailors, Marines, and their families in times of need. All our listeners get 10% off every order of their amazing coffee by using the discount code DEEP at checkout. So check them out at saltysailorcoffee.com.
It's interesting that these four pillars that you talk about, one of the first things that when I take over a business and I sense sort of an us and them, situation going on, is I constantly kind of remind people that the enemy is outside the four walls. It's not inside the four walls, right? And so on a submarine, it's very interesting because that's what I spent my early days doing on a submarine. The enemy was very clear. It was the sea pressure wanting to come into the people cabinet, right? And so our job was to keep that out, right?
Yeah.
And also worry about the Soviets as well at the same time, right?
Right.
So, but the enemy was very clear. We knew who the enemy was. It was outside the four walls, which meant that we worked together to make sure that the enemy never got inside the four walls. But to your point, when we get into corporate or we get into business, oftentimes we say, the enemy is marketing, or those guys took this order, they shouldn't have taken it. The quality department told me this. And the enemy seems like it's inside the four walls, right?
Yeah.
And so when you say who is them, right? Them is us, right?
Right.
So, and
Totally.
Yeah. And so part of that is, how do we create a situation where the enemy, that we're in it together, we know that we're in it together, and that the enemy's not inside but outside. Is that something that you talk about as well?
Absolutely. Again, and I think at some level, this is also where in sports and in the military, look, in business, we obviously have competition externally, companies we're competing with, market share we're going after. I do think a lot of where competition shows up in an unhealthy way is internally pointing fingers, blaming, complaining about this department or that department or leadership or, especially in global organizations where there's a lot going on. And that doesn't mean that we can't talk about hard things or there isn't pressure being put on or misunderstanding, but like a lot of it comes down to connection and empathy. Like one of the examples I often use, it's kind of a silly one, but it's like, when you're stuck in traffic, you're on the freeway or somewhere and you don't want to let someone merge in, what do? You don't look at them, right? Like you keep your eyes straight forward. You're like, I'm not looking. Because the moment you turn to look at that other person who you do not know and will probably never see again the rest of your life, unless they're screaming at you and flipping you off, you are going to make eye contact with the person and you're going to let them in, right? Because you're going to have that human moment of empathy where you go, sometimes I'm the person out there trying to merge and no one's letting me in, and that's a terrible feeling. Right. And usually, you let one person in and then hopefully you get a wave and you have that moment. That happens like inside of organizations. Like some of the work that I do is I'll come and work with leadership teams or even departments where, especially when there's conflict, and get people around a table or get people in a room. Like, let's talk about what's going on. Because it's really hard up close when we start to connect with other humans to turn them into the bad guy or they're crazy or they're stupid or they're ridiculous, because then you realize like, no, they may be doing things that we don't understand or don't agree with or don't particularly like, when it's probably 99 times out of 100, if not 999 times out of 1,000, it's not malicious. They're not trying to screw us over and make our lives miserable. They're literally just trying to solve problems and get things done either for the customer or for whatever objectives they're trying to accomplish. And especially the bigger an organization gets or the more sort of matrixed or complicated it is, sometimes it's set up to put people at odds with each other, not maliciously or intentionally, but it's like your objectives and my objectives are bumping into each other. But if we can talk about that and understand that and have more of a mature discussion about it, oftentimes it's like, oh, okay, multiple things can be true at the same time. Like we can work together and collaborate if we're willing to and interested in, but sometimes people don't want to be honest. They just want to complain and they want to blame other people because then that somehow makes their life easier, or at least they think so. But that ultimately doesn't lead to not only connection, collaboration, and strong culture, but you can't perform well if that's constantly going on.
Yeah, that's for sure. You mentioned the term sweaty palm conversations. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think one of the things I noticed in my military career is like we had it out, like we had tough discussions inside the hull, right? But then we worked it out, to where okay, this is where we're going to go, this is what we're going to do. And I imagine on a sports team it can be similar, where you argue strategy and what have you, and then but once you sort of reach that consensus, then you're all executing together. But what I noticed is we didn't do that when I got to my corporate life. Like we didn't have these sweaty palm conversations. We sort of, if someone had a problem with you, they sort of just undermined you and didn't have a conversation with you. And so that was kind of interesting. So tell me a little bit about what you meant by that.
Yeah, well, and it's tricky, right? Because politeness and even niceness, while good intention, often gets in the way. And I'm not advocating that we're screaming and yelling at each other necessarily, but building that sense of psychological safety, creating that sense of belonging, what that leads to is an ability to have these conversations. This phrase comes from a mentor of mine years ago, said to me, Mike, you know what stands between you and the kind of relationships you really want to have with people? I said, what's that? He said, it's usually a 10-minute sweaty palm conversation you're too afraid to have. He said, if you get good at having those sweaty palm conversations sooner rather than later, you'll have fantastic relationships. You'll build trust. You'll resolve conflict. You'll get to know people who are different than you. You'll talk things out. You'll work things through. You'll give feedback. You'll get feedback. He said, but if you do like most of us and you avoid those conversations, then you end up sort of being a victim of who you work with, who you live with. Hopefully people are, well-intentioned and honest. And he goes, but oftentimes that leads to all kinds of resentments and misunderstandings and unresolved conflicts that just make things difficult. And, look, he was right. And like most humans, I don't love having those conversations. My first instinct is not like, hey, let's talk about hard things. Let's sit down and really hash everything out. I mean, I know how important it is. I want to do that. But oftentimes my instincts, like a lot of people's, are let's avoid it, or let's gloss over it, or let's just move on and keep things positive and happy. But again, great teams talk to each other, not about each other. And if we build that sense of trust and psychological safety, when we have to have it out, especially I can imagine in the military, it's like, hey, this is like life and death here. we can't mess around and just be tiptoeing around worried about hurting people's feelings or offending people. And again, I think there's a way we can go about it very consciously and deliberately, because sometimes people will use it. Like there are people that I work with and have coached over the years who are mean to people, who are bullies, who just kind of scream and yell and rant and rave and, oh, I'm just being honest. I'm just being authentic. Like, get over it. And it's like, okay, yeah. And you're scaring everyone and you're, shutting people down. Like that's
Right.
actually not. So again, as a leader, you got to be careful and mindful. You don't want to walk around being super nice to everybody. And then as soon as they leave the room, telling people what you really think. But at the same time, if you're screaming and yelling and banging on tables and stuff, like that's also probably not a healthy way to go about it. So it's finding that balance and that mature way to really have those conversations respectfully and effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things we didn't touch about, you talked about psychological safety, and that's the kind of essential when you're trying to create a team, a unified team where people can have these discussions. You didn't. One of the things that we didn't talk about yet is emotional intelligence, and where does that play in terms of the leadership being able to create the condition where we feel like we're all on the same team?
I mean, I think it's foundational to everything, right? I mean, emotional intelligence is essentially, self-awareness and self-management, which, by the way, it's an ongoing, lifelong journey for all of us. Continue to learn more about ourselves, continue to, just people listening to or watching this podcast right now, it's like learn, grow, read books, listen to other people, so that process is something that we can all do. I mean, there's a lot of cliches that are cliches because they're true. It's like great leaders are great learners. So that's the one side. The other side of it is social awareness and relationship management, right? So understanding that, not everybody's wired the way that I'm wired. Not everybody's motivated the same way. Not everybody grew up the same way I grew up. Not everybody, looks the same. And again, it's like you meet someone else who's like your same age or came from your same town. You have certain relatables. And then you meet someone who's quite a bit younger or older or just different race, gender, background, whatever. And you realize, oh, wow. Okay, it's not that we can't relate. It's not that we can't have a great relationship, but like I'm going to have to get curious to get to know this person a little bit better or find out a little bit more about not only them personally, but where they're from and what their influences may be. You see a lot of this, especially these days with generational differences. It's easy to complain about, oh, those, millennials, those Gen Zers or whatever. But it's like, well, what about getting curious?
Yeah.
And being interested, so much of that is emotional intelligence, right? Because if I can only manage people who are my same age or grew up where I grew up or look like me or whatever, like that's going to very much limit our effectiveness and our ability. So I think constantly developing our emotional intelligence is important.
Yeah. I think if we're going to build relationships, I think that's a really key skill set to have, or I don't know if it's a skill set or a characteristic to have, because I think you're able to sense your emotions and other people's emotions as you're having, uncomfortable conversations and what have you. And I tend to like really notice people's reactions and emotions. And so maybe I'm a little too empathetic sometimes, but I think that's an important thing to have. So you recognize, oh, this is creating stress, or this is creating someone's feeling uncomfortable in this conversation, or, and so you're able to sense your audience that you're having a discussion with. I think that's a really important skill to have, like to be able to sense someone's reaction to what, the things you're discussing.
Absolutely. I mean, look, when we're talking about leadership, we talk about sales, we talk about communication and relationships. I mean, being able to look, we can't read people's minds, but we can pick up, even look, technology is great and can sometimes be a hindrance. Harder to tell when we're texting someone or we're communicating on Slack or email. A little easier, still challenging if we're on the telephone or we're on Zoom or we're on FaceTime. Usually we can pick up more things when we're in person, but these days we're in person less than ever in terms of people we're communicating with and doing business with. So it's really developing those, skills of empathy and understanding and checking in with people. And just because someone does feel uncomfortable or gets a little stressed about something doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. I think a lot of really good leaders, I mean, I'm sure you've had this experience too. It's like finding that balance point where how can I challenge someone, push them, hold them accountable, intentionally push them out of their comfort zone for the purpose of growth and development and performance without shutting them down. Right? Because I think sometimes, years ago when I was doing coaching training, I remember them saying, this was 20 some years ago, life coaching, business coaching was still kind of a new thing. But one of the trainers that I had was saying, like, you should be coaching people in such a way that they want to fire you almost every coaching session. And I remember thinking, like, that seems harsh. But they're like, look, they're literally paying you
Yeah.
to push them, to challenge them. Like, why would you hold back and try to be nice for the sake of being nice? And they weren't advocating that we be mean or rude or disrespectful, but like, and again, I think as leaders, and people will say things to me like, well, everyone's so sensitive these days, or these kids, or, I hear this from people who've been in management and leadership for a long time. And I understand where they're coming from. So I'm not, but I say, look, you have to continue to sharpen your saw, so to speak, to figure out, how do I manage these people today? The world today is different than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, for better and for worse in some ways, depending on your perspective. But it's like, be good at what you do and be honest when you're struggling with someone. Again, if you're having a hard time connecting with someone or reaching someone or coaching someone or managing someone, you could make them wrong. You could say, well, they're so sensitive, or they're this, or the world's like that. Or you could go, wow, I'm really struggling to connect with this person. Maybe you could just ask them, right? Like, hey, I'm having a hard time from my perspective connecting with you. I want to be the best leader, the best manager, the best boss I can be for you. Can you give me a little feedback or give me a roadmap for how to do that? Because I'm not figuring it out on my own. That's actually a great conversation to have with somebody, proactively, whether you've been managing them for a week or for 5 years. If you're having a hard time and not sure exactly what to say or what to do or how to get the most out of them, you could just ask.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. So don't make assumptions. Actually have that sweaty palm conversation. Like something's wrong here. It's funny. I've told the story before on the podcast where I had an employee in a plant that I ran. He was always friendly with me and all that, and then all of a sudden, like almost overnight, he just wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't say hi to me, and so I always had an angry look whenever he saw me. And I never had that uncomfortable conversation. I just said, I don't know what's wrong with him. It's not my problem. I got other things to do. And I wish, and I left that business without ever having that conversation with that individual. That I must have done something, but I don't know what it was. And I regret that I didn't have that conversation, just to say, what did I do wrong? Or what have I done to maybe offend you or get you upset? Because, suddenly something happened almost overnight,
Well, yeah. And look, that stuff happens in life sometimes. And it can be challenging to go ask about that. And one of the techniques I've learned around situations like that, if someone starts treating us differently and we don't know what's going on, or we just, for some reason, maybe it's not as overt, it's a little more covert, but we're getting that sense of like, I think they're annoyed with me. I think they're upset with me. I don't know. I often like to just phrase the question this way or say something to the effect of like, hey, can we talk about something? The story that I've been making up is that you don't like me anymore, or you don't trust me anymore, or that I did something to offend you. Am I just completely making that up? Or, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like I had a therapist years ago that would say to me, this was more with respect to raising our teenage daughters. He would say, play the fool. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, just play the fool. I mean, like, I don't understand. I'm confused. Now, again, not like a manipulation, but just come into the conversation with that sense of beginner's mind, with that sense of curiosity, with that sense of, I must be missing something here because, like, I don't know what's going on, right? And again, it's not to just do it in some manipulative, aw shucks kind of way, but oftentimes what that does is we lead with curiosity. It eliminates some of our self-righteousness and judgment, and it tends to open people up to, like, especially if like I'm feeling concerned or I'm worried maybe that you're angry or disappointed or frustrated with me. Am I overreacting, or is there some truth to that? If so, either way, I'd love to talk to you about it. And then sometimes, now the person could lie to us and say, oh, no, it's fine. No, I got in a fight with my spouse, or I'm in a bad mood. And now if they lie, there's not much we can do, right? We tried. Right. Yeah. And if they're going to, oh no, I'm good. It's just like, but maybe if they keep acting weird, now we go back and just say, look, I'm feeling weird now. Like, I don't know what happened, but I'm uncomfortable. I notice when I'm around you, again, we put it back on us, because all we can really ever do in life, even as leaders, even as managers, even when we have feedback for other human beings, all we can really authentically do is speak from our own experience. I think, I notice, I want, I'm feeling, whatever it is. Even if the person is literally like breaking all the rules and doing all these things that they can't be doing, we could go and say, hey, okay, I need you to stop doing that because from my perspective, that's a problem. We have these policies in place and those are violations of the policy, right? And that's more of an extreme situation. Usually it's more like we're trying to influence behavior change in people, which is hard to do, by the way. But the only real way to do it is to invite them into a behavior change that they ultimately choose.
Yeah. That is really powerful advice. Yeah. I wish I had known you about 20 years ago when I was. I still regret not having that that conversation, but it is what it was. I was young and I was still trying to figure things out at the time. But no, this has been fantastic. I really like all the things that you covered in here, and it really has given us a lot to think about with respect to leadership and how to build a unity within our teams, within our groups. This has been a fantastic conversation. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners today?
I think, as we talk so much about leadership and other people and teamwork and everything, I think one really important aspect of leadership that often we don't focus enough on is really leading ourselves and taking care of ourselves, right? I mean, I'm a big believer in we don't see other people as they are, we see them as we are. So the more we can be kind and compassionate and caring and supportive and, respectfully hold ourselves accountable, I feel like that puts us in the best position possible to influence other people. It's like, what did Gandhi teach us, right? Be the change. But if we can do it from a place of genuine care and compassion for ourselves, I actually think that makes us show up more authentically and more effectively when we're attempting to lead others.
I love that. Lead yourself first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. That is a great piece of advice. Mike, I really appreciate you coming on the show. How can our listeners find out more about you, all of your books, and the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on all the social platforms and my books are available on Amazon or wherever you get books. But the best place to connect with me and learn more about my work is at our website, which is mike-robbins.com.
Fantastic. We're going to put links in the show notes for all of Mike's resources. And if there's something in here in the conversation that really sparks some interest to you, that you're curious about, I really highly encourage you to reach out to Mike. He's the expert. He's the one that has written the books. He's has this experience, and I really encourage you to reach out to him. So we'll have the links in the show notes right here, and go ahead and click on the link. Reach out to Mike and ask a question if you got a question or two, because he can help you through that, trying to discover what you're trying to solve. So, Mike, I really want to really thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for the work you're doing. And I think it's really necessary in this world. And so I really appreciate these messages of unity, this message of psychological safety, emotional intelligence. I think this is really important for leaders to understand. So thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.